Resources and development. What is a resource? In this unit, we shall discuss what is a resource, what are the different categories of resources available for us, and then how this a development activity plays a major role for us. How can we use the resources and develop the nation? Now moving on to understand the meaning of the word, what is a resource? A resource is something which is available for us in the nature. When something is available for us in the nature, does everything what is available for us in the nature is called a resource? No, it needs to have certain qualifications. At the same time, it should be at the accessible cost of the human beings. Let us look at this triangle, then you can understand some picture of what is a resource. A resource is a thing which is under the human control, where available in the physical environment. At the same time, if we have the technical knowledge to make that one available for us, then we can use the institutions to develop the resources. This is a triangle of the resources which helps to explain the exact meaning of resource. What is a resource? The fundamental question of the lesson. What is a resource? A resource is everything that available in the environment for the human mankind to satisfy the resources which are used to satisfy the human needs, especially the human beings' needs and our wants. Then for that we need again technical assistance for us to do that one. So that's how it is very, very important to understand the meaning of a resource. A resource is a subject or an object which is available for us, everything in the environment to satisfy the human needs or wants, resulting with the help of a technical knowledge is known as a resource. So a resource can be broadly categorized into anything that is available for us in the nature which can be used to satisfy the needs of the human beings, and at the same time we also will have our requirements and our accessibility available for us in the technical sector known as resources. That also should be at the affordable cost. So that is the fundamental meaning of the word resource. So after understanding the meaning of the word resource, everything whatever is available for us in the nature at the affordable cost of the human beings in order to satisfy the needs of the human beings is known as a resource. So the resources are useful for us, especially for the human beings. From the physical nature they get this one, and then using the technical knowledge they derive them from the nature in a usable manner by the human beings. For that purpose only we establish the institutions, and these institutions bring for us the economic development. So in order to bring the economic development of a nation, we need to understand that the humans derive their resources from the nature using the technical knowledge and assign the institutions to develop the economical development. That is how the economic development of a nation is directly linked with the available resources in the country or on the soil of the nation. Now let us see the classification of the resources. As we discussed that resources are the main things for the economic development, how can we categorize the resources? The resources are again broadly categorized into four major categories. Category 1 is being done on the basis of origin. How is the resource available for all of us? How is it originating? That is a basic consideration for the first division. Second division is the basis for exhaustibility. After how much time does it get exhausted? How many times can we utilize this one? Later, basing on the origin is the third major division. Who is the owner of this one? First one is origin, second one is exhaustibility, third one is ownership. Well, coming to the fourth one, status of the development. What is the status of the development of that particular resource? On these four bases, the resources are being categorized. First one, basis of origin, second one, basis of exhaustibility, third one, basing on the ownership, fourth one, basing on the status. Now moving on to understand further on the basis of origin, the material of resources are again being divided into biotic and abiotic. Abiotic and biotic. Biotic means which we get naturally available in the nature. The items or the minerals, the resources, whatever you get naturally available in the nature are called as biotic, and most of the biotic things have life in them. That is a special feature of this one. So biotic are the things which have life in them. Example of biotic are flora and fauna, fisheries and the livestock. All the living animals available in the nature, all the living creatures available in the nature come under the category of biotic. Examples are flora and fauna, fisheries, livestock. Moving to the next category in the same basis of origin, the second one is abiotic. Abiotic is very simple, the complete dead opposite of biotic, where it consists of all the non-living creatures or all non-living things like rocks, metals, etc. So abiotic means it is explicitly dealing with all the non-living things available in the nature. That is called abiotic, rocks and metals. Then moving on to second category of division, that is a basis of exhaustibility. The items, how are they going to get exhausted? Again, it is further redivided into non-renewable sources and renewable sources. Exhaustibility is a nature of a resource which makes the resource to get exhausted. Once the resource is getting exhausted, we cannot use this one. So for further clarification and to understand this one better, again it has been redivided into non-renewable and renewable sources of energy. Non-renewable sources are petrol, coal. These kind of resources, we cannot reframe them. For example, petrol once used is being done. Again we cannot reuse the petrol. In the same way, coal, once it is burned, it turns into ash and we cannot use it again further. So these two comes under the category of non-renewable sources of energy or non-renewable sources of items available for us. When we talk about the renewable sources, in renewable sources you can take solar energy or wind energy as the examples. Renewable means something which can be done again, renew the things, make the things further better, renovate them, reuse them, like that. The solar energy is very vast, you can use it daily. For example, today you use the solar energy, it doesn't get exhausted today itself. Tomorrow again sun will come, tomorrow again you have the source of energy for you. So in this way, solar energy is the best example of renewable sources of energy. And at the same time, wind. Wind, when we take, wind is an unending passing of the moving of the air. So air, once it moves, it doesn't get exhausted. Once it moves, twice it moves, 10 times it moves, 20 times it moves, 100 times it moves, it doesn't get exhausted at any time. That is the specialty of solar wind. Then moving on to the third category of resources, that is ownership. Who is the owner of the particular resource? That depends again into three categories, that is, first one is individual ownership, second one is national, and the third comes under the category of international ownership. First one, when it comes to individual ownership, any private individual who owns a land, who owns a property, who owns a mine, who owns any item or any substance in which the natural resources are found comes under the category of individual. That is an example of private lands, private properties, private fields. All this comes under the category of individual properties. When it comes to the national one, when it is maintained for the purpose of the public good, it is free for the use of the public, that is called public property. Examples of this one are burial ground, villages, ponds, rivers, lakes, public parks, public municipal offices. All these come under the public properties, where no one can claim that this is my property, this property belongs to me. Only the individual properties can be claimed by any person. But when it comes to the public properties, nothing can be claimed by any one individual. It belongs to the state property, it belongs to the national property, it belongs to the authority of the people's representatives property, where you cannot expect that it could be owned by a single individual. That's why it is called as a national property. Moving on to the third category, that is international property. International property comes under exclusive economic zone on any ocean region. What is exclusive economic zone? The exclusive economic zone is the area after 200 nautical miles from the border area or the coastal line is known as exclusive economic zone, from where any nation cannot take its reserves in the water, though it come under it's very close to its land boundary. It has to take the international concern of the international bodies like UN. Then only it can take any kind of reserves or any kind of uses or any kind of energy can be taken from that particular regions. Otherwise, it enters into an international conflict into the nation, from one nation into the other nation. So there is a clear-cut division of the properties: individual properties, group property known as national property, or owned only for international benefit of the larger good of the people, that is international properties. So they basing on the ownership of the place, property, resource, everything also we have the division, that is ownership ship division. And then status of development. The status of the development was also be considered as very key for the resources. The first one is, again the status of the development is further redivided into three major categories. One is potential, basing on the potential of the thing, whether the potential is properly utilized or not, that is secondary. But how much potential does it have? That's very important. For example, you go to Gujarat or you go to Rajasthan. In Gujarat, you have abundant availability of solar energy. That is the potential of the Gujarat. At the same way, you have lot of energy available in the regards to wind. That is available in Rajasthan. That is the potentiality of Rajasthan. Whether these are utilized properly or not, that is secondary. That is immaterial now. When we talk about the potential, what is the potential of that particular land? That is called potential here. Examples we have here, solar is the best potential when it comes to Gujarat. Then moving on to developed, whether the resource has been developed or not, basing on the availability of the stock and the affordable cost of the human beings. If the resource has been taken outside and is used for development, that is called developed. Example we have here, uranium. Uranium bauxite is available for us in the nature. These are available with the raw materials and ores mixed with them. But once they are mixed and they are taken outside, then you can utilize it according to your convenience. That's how you get the uranium and bauxite. And that's the why reason the resources are called developed resources. Then moving on to the third one, stock and resources. Availability of the product in a larger scale is called the stock. Whether the stock you have in large or not, that is a major important category. And then whether the reserves are available for us for the future generations. For example, you take water. Water formula is H2O, hydrogen, 2 parts, oxygen, 1 part. Together is called hydrogen oxide or water. When we use this water, when it is containing hydrogen and oxygen, here we have the stock of fresh hydrogen and oxygen together available in the form of water on a very large scale. That's why this resource is called stock and reserves. So broadly, the resources are being categorized into 4 major categories. The first one is basis on the origin of the resources. It is been again redivided into biotic and abiotic. The examples of biotic are flora and fauna. The example of abiotic is rocks and metals. When it comes to the basis of exhaustibility, we have non-renewable energy, that is again petrol and coal, whereas the renewable energy coming in the category of solar and wind. When it comes to the third category, that is ownership, individual owners, national owner or the international owner. When it comes to individual, we have private lands. When it comes to national, we have the burial grounds, village, ponds. India's special economic zone, where India has its authority up to 12 nautic miles, means 19.2 kilometers from the Indian border to the water available there, and then to the international boundary where exclusive economic zones are present. So these all are the third category of division. And moving on to the fourth one, status of the development, on which the potential is solar, while the development of uranium and bauxite, where the metals are well developed. And moving on to stocks and reserves, where we have water, the combination of hydrogen and oxygen, it has to be reserved, and we have the large reserves and stocks. That's how the results go on. So this is the rough division of the resources available for us. Basing on their availability, we have again further redivided them, and now let us count the total divisions that can be made for the resources is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So they have 4 major divisions and again re-subdivided into 14 subdivisions. Now moving on to the categorization of the resources, we have discussed that the resources are being categorized into 4 major categories, that all division we have seen explicitly. Now moving on to the development of the resources. As I told you before, the triangle which shows for us the physical availability in the environment, which we have taken the categorization of that one. Once it physically is available for us, we need to develop them. Unless and until you don't develop what is available for you in the nature, you do not get any benefits of that. So you need to get the development. That development can only be done by taking out the resources. So when you are developing the resources are having certain problems. First problem is, it is the free gift of the God. When it is given free gift of the God or the nature, when it is available freely in the nature, because of some people's greedy nature, it started to become as depletion. It created a depletion for us. Suppose you have gold mines in your field, which is actually belonging to the nature, which is actually the natural property or the nation's property. If only one person who has found the golden mines started to take out the entire gold into his control, dig it and take the gold with him, then obviously it proves to be gold scarce in the society, because the entire gold is with only one person, with only a few group of people. That's how it leads to depletion for us, reduction of the value. Next, concentration. Very few people hold the control on the natural resources. Actually, natural resources belong to everybody in the country or in the nation. But as everybody do not hold them directly, it is run by the government, and government holds that authority to control them. When government is holding the authority and controlling them, it is a basic responsibility of the government to take care that it is not misused by anybody else. But many of the private individuals who are rich, who are powerful, who have the influence in the government, try to get some benefits from the government and start to use the entire resources for their own purposes to benefit in terms of economy, financially. That's how the concentration has become in very few people's hand, which has brought the basic division between the people haves and have-nots. And then moving on to the indiscriminate exploitation. We have a good example for this one in Karnataka, where the Ballari mines will give a very good example for this. Ballari mines, where you get iron ore. The iron ore has been taken by a private company of Reddy brothers, owned by the Reddy brothers. These Reddy brothers have removed the boundaries of one state to the other state and started to exploit the entire iron ore and export it to the other countries and earned huge profits. Actually, these mines belong to nature, national property, where they are not supposed to use other states' mine region, where these people have crossed that region and started to use that one. So they are being very greedy, That's how exploitation has become very high on the case of the national properties, and then this exploitation will automatically result in adverse effects on the nature. The adverse effects examples are global warming, ozone layer depletion, then the environmental pollution. So the resources have to be developed, then only you can get the benefits of having a resource. That resources should not be brought into depletion because of very few people's greed. Few people greed of having more and more wealth. When they were greeding to have more and more wealth, that automatically results in the problematic situation because they start to take it at the cost of others' benefit. Next, the second point is the concentration should not be in few people's hands. The concentration should be in the larger region. The concentration of the lands should be in the larger growth. And the third one, indiscriminate use. When we are using without preserving for the future, that will get the adverse effects on the nation or the natural climatic conditions like global warming, ozone layer depletion, environmental pollution. And later, how do we need to plan for the resources planning? What is the requirement to have resources planning? We need to have resources planning because in the resources planning, we can make sure that the resources are used on a sustainable growth for all. What is sustainable existence or sustainable growth or sustainable development? The word sustainable means here for us that in the development, when you are planning to develop anything, the development should take place. Yes, we all need to develop, but that should not cause any harm to environment. That is the first point. The second point is no compromise within the needs. There should not be any compromise within the needs, because when we compromise now, we take on explicitly without preserving it for the future generation people may miss their natural share for which they are eligible. So the sustainable development is the development of the resources is must. They have to be developed, but at the same time, they should not compromise on any of the interests of the future generations, and it should not cause any harm to the environment. That's how the sustainable development is required. So when we plan the resource planning, sustainable existence of all forms of life is must. Then only we can have the sustainable development which results in the overall development of all in the society. Understanding what happened in Rio de Janeiro. Rio de Janeiro was the first international conference which was held on June 1992. In this conference, nearly 100 country states heads have come and they all joined to have a group action, because its urgent problem is the problems of the environment protection and the socio-economic development. The main agenda of Rio de Janeiro summit, which was held in June 1992, in which 100 nations countries heads have come in Brazil, where their main concern was the urgent problems of the environment protection and socio-economic development. All these are the main concerns of the people all over the world. So immediately the environment protection has to be brought into action. We need to protect our environment. If not, we would face many difficult problems. So in order to avoid those problems, we need to plan sustainable development. So in order to make this one at every level, they have brought an agenda called Agenda 21. Agenda 21 states clearly that we need to plan for sustainable development. As I told you earlier, what is sustainable development? Sustainable development is a development in which the resources are used to develop, but at the same time, naturally it should develop. It should not hurt or harm any of the future benefits. We should not develop anything at the cost of the future generations' resources. we need to preserve the resources, we need to modify the resources, we need to use them cleverly as per our requirement, not in a too greedy nature. So that's how sustainable development is the main agenda of Agenda 21, which has been initiated in Rio de Janeiro summit in 1992. It also states that every nation should have its own local Agenda 21. So along with sustainable development, it also clearly claims that we should have our own local Agenda 21. Sustainable development on a larger scale. At the same sustainable development at the local levels, every country should plan its own sustainable development. This own sustainable development is the resource planning. The planning of the resources is very widely accepted because it is the judicious way of using the resources. The best way of using the resources is called resource planning. Without spending it in a too explicitly manner, without using it in a very less scarcity manner, plan it very properly in the medium line so that you do not feel that it is shortage. At the same time, you do not say that it is in the exhaust. So you need to plan in a medium path where we can achieve the development. The sustainable development should be the prime focus attention whenever we plan on any resources. So resource planning has been very widely accepted strategy in which you judiciously plan how to use your resources. Now moving on to understand the resources, let us take an example of India. In a country like India, where we have diverse culture, diverse nature, where you have different diverse people staying together, spending time, living together, where we have different language spoken people, different cultural people, different languages adopted, then different cultural people living there, different ideologies people living together, different religious people living together, different communities people living together, different tribal people living together. All these are combined features of India. India is a land of diversity. India is having different physical features also. That's how India has got its place in the land of variety, where you have variety of minerals available, variety of resources available for the Indians. India land is a land in which the shield of resources are present. So the variety of the resources, like for example, let us take the minerals. Minerals are widely available in Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh and the Chhattisgarh regions. The minerals like coal are very widely available in the states like Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. When it comes to the deficit, we have deficit in regards to the terms like water. Water is abundantly found and causing floods always in Arunachal Pradesh state, where the flow of Brahmaputra brings abundant availability of water. Rajasthan, the state of desert, where we have huge availability of solar energy, where the potential of Rajasthan has not been recognized. So when I talk about the minerals, they are not available in Rajasthan. When I talk about the minerals, they are not available in Arunachal Pradesh. When I talk about water, it is not available in Rajasthan. When I talk about the solar energy, it is not available in Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh or Chhattisgarh. So there are certain minerals which are available in one region of the country, while the same minerals are not available in the other region of the country. So here we have the variety of the minerals, other side we have the deficient of the minerals or the deficit of the minerals. The availability of the minerals and the deficit of the minerals should be brought into balance. That's what it is called the resource planning. The resource planning has to be done, and the resource planning should be done by collaborating the national interest, the state interest and the local interest, and also to fulfill the national needs, state needs and the local needs. That's how we need to plan our resources. The resources have to be planned very well, so that you need to fulfill the needs of nation, along with that fulfilling the needs of a state, along with that fulfilling the needs of the local requirements of that particular area. That's what we discussed earlier also in the Agenda 21. Every nation should have its own agenda of Agenda 21. That's what the main theme of Rio de Janeiro summit, which held in Brazil in 1992, where their main agenda was sustainable development. Do not harm the future resources which actually belong to the future generations, where actually they have to get it the natural share. So go for natural sustainable development, having a development which also results by preserving of the resources for the future needs. That's what when we come to talk about the resource planning also, where resource planning is a widely accepted strategy of the judicious use of the resources. This judicious use of the resources is variety and diversity. Let's take the example of India. In India, we have variety of resources and they are diverse in nature. For example, in the states like Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, you find much abundant availability of coal, where in Arunachal Pradesh you find abundant availability of water, while in the other states like Rajasthan you find abundant availability of solar energy. Where it comes to these three states, you find different resources available for you at different places. So when it comes to one side, the other side it is deficit in the other mineral resources. So we need to balance this variety and this deficit in order to get and fulfill the needs of national interest, state interest and the local interest. First plan for the local interest to get satisfied, then you can plan for the state interest to satisfy, then further resulting in the national interest to satisfy. That's how we need to plan our resource planning. Now moving on to understand the resource planning in India. We already discussed about the resource planning. Resource planning has been a very judicious way of using the resources, but at the same time it has been a very complex planning, because nowadays you need to identify many things before planning something. First of all, we need to identify the location of the places where the resources are found. The identification itself will bring that half of the energy for us, because when the resources are found, you can do something. When the resources are not found, we cannot do anything. That's how it results on. So the resources have to be found clearly. Then only we can take any action on that. That's how the resources have to be found. And next, in order to identify the resources, you need the methods like surveying. You need to survey the place. You need to study about the place. You need to know about that particular place, and then you can identify what are the resources that are available for us. For example, when we take Rajasthan, it's a very basically hot place. When it's a hot place, you can't expect there you can get some huge amount of cool climatic condition there. So on a hot dry land, you can expect solar energy, you can expect wind energy. That's what surveying means. You can't expect solar energy on the eastern edge of India, where in Arunachal Pradesh, where you regularly get floods. So that's very important for us to identify in which region you get what kind of things. The second one, mapping. What is the exact location of the resource? The mapping skills also gets you added to get the exact picture of what and where is the resource found. The second point is a planning structure. A detailed planning structure has to be maintained so that you can have the combination of technology, skill, institutional setup in order to utilize the resource. Once you found that there is a resource that is found there, but still you don't know how to utilize that one. For example, you know that you found huge amount of solar energy is found in Rajasthan, but you don't know that how to use the solar energy equipment and how to get the skilled employees for that, and what is the way to process the solar energy which is found in the nature into institutional utilization of electricity. So you should know the path how to develop that one. So for that you need structural planning, which is very important after identification of the resources. Then moving on to the match with the national development plan. Once you plan for your state, at the same time it should be going parallelly and aligning with the national development plans. You cannot plan only with your own interest. You have to align it, and you need to get the budget allotted for that from the union budget. So for that you need to align it with the national interest. Then only you can get the perfect resource planning for our available resource. That's how we have to plan for our resources. And moving on to the resources, when can a resource be successfully utilized? First point, we should have the technical advancements. We all know that in a country like India, even though we have many resources, but lack of technology will definitely block the development of the resources. Well, at the same time, though resources are found, but economically backward, then also it brings a hinder step towards the development. First point is, if it is resources found, technology is not there, you don't get development. Resources found, economical backwardness is there, it will not get development. When poor resource base, resource is very less, but you have economic development there, it results in development. If you have technology advancement there, it results in development. So technology and economic resource play a very vital role. That's what we have to understand here. And when it comes to conservation of the resources, how can we protect our resources? How should we use our resources? We already discussed that we need to utilize our resources very, very carefully and judiciously. Gandhiji expressed the same views when he was having a view on the development. He told that there is enough for everybody for need, but there is no end for greed. That's what he quoted in a simple line, saying that there is enough for everybody's need, not for greed. So if you are greeding of too much, you will not get anything. If you are expecting for your natural share, definitely we can expect that you can get that one. That's how Gandhiji expressed his view. His views are remarkable on any point. Let it take maybe on untouchability. Let it be taken on humanitarian aspects. Let it be taken on planning system. Whatever it is, Gandhiji always had a foresighted view and gave a statement. Now, after many years, he passed away. The Club of Rome in 1968, first of all, claimed the view that economically or the development should be on sidelines with the environmental protection. For the first time in a systematic way, Club of Rome in 1968 presented its ideology that now we need to concentrate on development, but at the same time we need to remember that we should not curb the rights of the future generations. And next, Gandhiji's views were again brought back in 1974 by Schumacher in his words, saying that small is beautiful. Small is beautiful, what Gandhiji meant in the other words, saying that you have for everybody but not for greed. In the same way you can get small is beautiful. Here, Brundtland Commission report also in 1987 expressed the same view that we need to go for sustainable development. So sustainable development have been the larger voice. Slowly and slowly it started to be raised from a very small place to a very large place, where in 1992 June, Rio de Janeiro summit, where 100 country nations head met there to discuss about the immediate action of plan on the environmental protection and to have Agenda 21. Agenda 21 clearly states for us that we need to plan for sustainable development, and also to have our own local Agenda 21 will again be stating that national, state and local interest has to be fulfilled on the guidelines of sustainable development. That's what we have the main focus of resource planning in India. Now we shall discuss about how the land pattern is being used in various corners of India. Let us see here, how is a land called a resource? We have seen in the previous part of the lesson discussing about the various categorization of the resources, basing on their origin, basing on the availability, basing on the renewable sources. All these things, the categories are being discussed explicitly. After discussing the different characteristics, now moving on to understand land as a resource. Land in the entire world, we have 78% of the earth covered with water and 21% is covered with land. If the statistics are being taken, the entire planet, it covers only 70% of the entire planet into water levels, whereas 29% is covered with land, according to some scientists. It is already proven that Earth is also known as watery planet or a blue planet because most amount of the Earth is covered with water. So from this discussion, we can come to get the knowledge that the land available in the Earth, the planet itself, is limited when compared to the water. Water is 2/3 part of the planet, while the Earth is only just 1/3 of the entire planet. So now restricting its residence or its existence to just 1/3 of the entire planets, we get to clarity that 30% of the Earth what we have has to be utilized very carefully and properly. That's the reason why land is known as finite magnitude or a limited place. In this limited place only, the entire land what we have has been again recategorized into mountains, plateaus, plains, islands, minerals, fossils, fuels, forests. So the entire magnitude of the land has been again categorized broadly into mountains, plateaus, plains, islands, minerals, and the forest lands. Now let us again take how much percentage of the land is being covered by mountains, the plains, the plateaus, the islands, the forests. Let us see here. The entire 30% of the land available on the earth is being covered by mountains. So 30% of the entire land is being covered under the mountain shelf. When we move on to the plateaus, we have nearly 27% of the entire land covered with plateaus. And further moving on to the plains, we have nearly 43% of the entire land covered with the plains. Now, in order to understand exactly how does we use the land, what are the different categories of the land uses, and that too when you take it in a specific significance to a particular nation, and let us understand first of all how is the land utilized. After knowing that land is available at very small in quantity when compared to water, the entire 100% of the planet has been covered with 70% of the water and 30% with land. Then moving on to understand the knowledge of how do you utilize the land as a resource, what are the different categories of land, how do we categorize the land. In order to understand these things, we have seen the study of finite magnitude where earth is always limited. Generally, in some areas when water comes or when heavy rains come, the capacity of the river, if it is going beyond the capacity of the river, then it emerges into floods. But there water may increase and may decrease. When it comes to land, the land do not increase, the land do not decrease. Maybe because of the landslides or hillslides, some part of the land may go on unused, but the land will not get increased at any time. Only land gets, possibilities are there to get decreased. When suddenly any earthquake comes or any tsunami may increase the water level of the sea body, covering some bit of the land into its area, somehow like that. So there is a possibility of reducing the percentage of land, but not any chance to get increase in the possibility of the land area. That's how it is very, very difficult. Now understanding this, again it has been categorized into mountains, plateaus, plains, mineral regions, islands, forest, fossil fuels and all these things. So this is the percentage given for us according to the scientists who are studying on this. Now moving on to understand how is the land utilized on a larger scale. Land has been utilized basically on first category is forest. On land only we have forests. Forest means growing enormous number of trees. Who will grow the enormous number of trees? You will grow? I will grow? No. Nature itself will make it to grow the trees there with an abundant variety of trees growing in there. Those are naturally born trees. Any human being cannot plant any tree in the forest because there is no need to do that. We have huge number of varieties of plants growing in the forest. There may be more than 100 to 500 varieties of plant species growing in that particular forest. There may be different kinds of animals growing in that particular forest. So that's how forests are the naturally given gifts, nature on the land. So the land has been utilized for having forests. Then moving on to the land which is not used for agriculture. Means we can get a point here is land is again recategorized into land used for agriculture, land not used for agriculture. Let us now first discuss about land not used for agriculture. When we talk about the land not used for agriculture, again we get the categorization like barren and wastelands. Barren means the dry lands, or where the possibility of getting water is very difficult, where you cannot get even a drop of water. Sir, how people will survive there, sir? People surviving is different. Cultivational lands getting water supply is different. Because, for example, in Rajasthan if you take, in Rajasthan, you don't get much agricultural fields available for you. But you find people staying there. So there is a possibility of people to stay there with a limited amount of water resources. But in order to do cultivation, the underground levels of the water should be increased. They should maintain some underground level of water. Then again from externally, you need to give daily water for the crop. That's how where it is not possible in the states like Rajasthan. That is the reason why you find barren and wastelands where they cannot be utilized, and later these barren and wastelands will turn into desert lands or empty lands. And afterwards, land put to non-agricultural uses. How is the non-agricultural uses coming on now? Sir, now you told there is a categorization between the land which is used for agriculture, which is not used for agriculture. In the same way, in the non-used agriculture also, some lands can be used in a better way, where they can be used for building roads, used for building infrastructure, used for using the connecting roads, buildings and all these things. Where you can establish a factory, when it is a dry land, free land, there you can establish a factory where there is no possibility of growing any agriculture there. Definitely you can use that land to establish a factory, an industry or anything, and get more amount of opportunities for the people. Let us take an example in Saudi. In Saudi or in the Arab states, where you have the possibility of getting water is very less. But there people are living there, industries are there, factories are there, where they do that one. So that's how we can utilize the non-agricultural lands. Next, third categorization is other uncultivated lands. Not used for agriculture, forest lands. Now third category, other uncultivated lands are permanent pastures, permanently dry lands. What, sir? Dry lands are dry lands. Again permanently dry lands, temporary dry lands also will be there. Yes. If in this land heavy cyclone or heavy rains occurred during that year, then this land may turn into a cultivatable land. Or if the government plans to get water from the nearby states through pipelines and started to supply water for these lands, then this above lands can be turned into cultivatable lands. There is a possibility like that. That is the reason why these lands are not considered as permanently barren lands. These lands are permanent pastures where even if you try also you cannot get agriculture done there. Let us take an example in Rajasthan desert region. Even if you supply daily water for that, there is no possibility to grow even a small plant there. That is the reason why permanent pastures are declared, which are very dry lands. And next, land under various trees. What are these various trees? There may be any number of trees. We know n number of trees growing in our earth. Some trees are good for us, some trees are not good according to some of the Hindu mythologies. Some people consider neem tree as a very holy tree, and tulsi tree almost you find in everyone's houses also. The tulsi tree daily morning, maybe your mother will be going and praying to that one and taking blessings and come. There are scientific reasons for that we get positive vibrations from that. The same thing when you go under neem tree, you have various spices or various herbs. Even in medicines also neem tree is being used. But sir, we are talking about lands which are having various trees. Various trees means these all are grown in our region only, no sir. So what is the new thing in this? Yes, neem tree, you know, tulsi tree, you know, some other trees also you may be seeing, guava tree, all these trees, you know, mango trees, all these, you know, you have possibility of seeing that one. In any house, you don't find Ashoka tree being grown, especially in the Indian context. What is Ashoka tree? A tree which is growing very tall and has leaves very thin in nature, and it is not at all considered as auspicious to have the tree. We feel that it is a trouble to have the tree in the house. The tree name is Ashoka tree. Why that got that one is that there are some stories regarding to Hindu mythology and all, where Lord in Ramayana we get some eclipse saying that here we have some Sita being staying under the tree and crying. So wherever you have that tree, there is a possibility to get some sorrows or some kind of problems for you. That's why in any of the houses, even in any of your houses also, you do not find any family growing Ashoka tree especially. That is another example. That's what I want to meant here, like there are various varieties of trees grown. One is tulsi tree, one is neem tree, the other trees where you don't consider them, they are important, but they are also occupying land. That is the point here. They also occupy a large amount of land in the entire earth. So that is 1% of land. And moving on to the other one, cultivable wastelands. From the past 5 years, they are not cultivating any lands. That lands are called cultivatable wastelands. You can cultivate there. You can do agriculture there. There is a possibility of doing agriculture there. But because there is no water from the past 5 years, economically that particular family is weak, or financially they are facing some crisis, that meant for them to stop cultivation there. In that result, it is called cultivatable wastelands. It can be cultivated, but it is not cultivated. And moving on to the other category, fallow lands. Fallow means empty. Empty lands, current fallow lands. Current fallow lands means, do you get current there, sir? Not that kind of doubts. Current means present. Current means present. Presently it is empty. What is empty? What is present? Currently it is empty means at present, this year, because of some problem, that particular family did not put any crop. That is called current fallow land. Means this year you did not do cultivation on that particular land. Every year they do, but only this year maybe in family some problem has been there. So nobody was interested, so they did not do anything. Somebody has been passed away or some other reasons may be there. So that may be meant to be empty in that particular land for that particular year. That is called fallow land. For 1 year if it is empty, that is called current fallow land. Don't get misconception like electricity, power, current. No, current means present. Present, empty land. It is not empty permanently. Then again category changes. It is only empty permanent only when it is coming to category of permanent pastures only. 5 years also you call it as cultivatable wasteland only. It is only 1 year. So we are calling it with a different name, that is current fallow lands. Next, other than current fallow lands are also some lands are there. Some lands which are permanently dry. Some are from 5 years dry. Some are from 1 year dry. Some are lands, but no one is using them. From how many years we don't know. It may be 2 years, it may be 10 years. But some trees are growing there. They may be good trees or bad trees, that is secondary. No one is doing cultivation there. These all categories of lands also come under this other than the current fallow lands. Then moving on to the net area zone. We started with all the dry lands. First we started with the forest, then the land which is not used for agriculture. Then we discussed the barren and the wastelands. In that again land which is not put for agricultural uses, non-agricultural uses like building roads, buildings, factories, infrastructure, everything. Other uncultivated lands, permanent pasture lands, land under trees. Then we went on to cultivatable wastelands from 5 years which are not been cultivated. Then fallow lands. In that fallow lands again we have current fallow lands. This year only they left it. Other than the fallow lands which are not done under cultivation, net area zone. The entire area where the cropping pattern has been in progress, is being done continuously without getting any gap and not falling into any category. It is not a land of forest. It is not a land of non-agricultural use. It is permanently used, regularly used. Every year they are using. This year also they used. That kind of area is known as net area zone. So now land has been utilized in different ways. Broadly, it can be categorized into 5 categories. First one is forest. Second category is land not for agriculture. Third category, the other uncultivated lands. Fourth category, fallow lands. And last but not the least, net area zone. The entire cultivatable land comes under the category of net area zone category only. So that's how the entire land has been categorized. The land features all are covered in this one. I think it is very good to have a quick recap of this one before concluding this one. When I say the finite magnitude, it is a fixed magnitude. In any physical features of any country, you find mountains, plains, plateaus, islands, forests. Other than this, do you find any other features? You do not find in any country. So, entire land in the country or in any of the countries or all countries together also, same percentage you will get. Which means all these categories are present in all countries. All countries together also you have all mountains, plains, plateaus, plains, islands, everything. So, the entire land is considered as a resource, where it is again being redivided into mountains, plains, plateaus, islands, forests, all these things. Land is being utilized almost in similar way in all countries. That's why it has been called as land utilization, like forest, land not for agriculture, other uncultivated lands, fallow lands, and the entire agricultural lands together. That we have in the land utilization pattern. Now, let us try to understand how the land use pattern is in India. How is land used exactly in India? We all know that India stands in 7th place according to its area. The land area of India is 3.28 million square kilometers. With geographically, latitudinally, longitudinally, the entire area of land which India holds is nearly 3.28 million square kilometers. Is 100% of our land is under our control? Yes, obviously, according to many of us know that it is under our control. But literally, we are not able to use 100% of land for our uses because 93% only comes under our usage. One is because of the northeastern states where the land is completely filled with hilly mountains and forest lands. The second reason is some of the parts which are occupied by Pakistan and some by China, where the actual survey was not done. So we don't know exactly 100% what is the exact land location extent of India where we are using. So it is estimated that 93% of land only is being used for Indian purpose, where Indian land is in our use. As we are talking about the usage of Indian land, we have only 93% of the land available for us. This 93% of land has been contributing a great significance for us because we all come under the category of this 93% of land available us for us to grow or for us to live, for us to stay, everything. In this, the permanent pastures are day by day coming down. Permanent pastures day by day coming down what, sir? Permanent pastures are the pastures which are used left dry, where the grass will be growing on there and is used for grazing of the animals. The animal number also is increasing more, so the permanent pastures are eaten up regularly by the animals. When the permanent pastures are eaten up regularly by the animals, automatically permanent pastures will come down. That land will become into a dry land. That's the way the land is coming down. Land size is not coming down. The land, the way it is used has been coming down. Earlier, because of the growth of the grass, it is called as a pasture land. But because the grass is not able to be grown there, because daily buffaloes, cows, everything are coming and doing the grazing activity there, and it is turning into a dry land, very soon it will turn into an empty land. then barren land. That's how the land is turning into a barren land. Then, according to the net area sown in India is only 54%. Out of the 93% available for us, only 54% of the land has been used for complete agricultural purpose. Is exact 54% used in all the states? Is exact 54% used in Rajasthan and exact 54% used in northeastern states, exact 54 used in the South Indian states? No. It varies from state to state. In one state it may be 10%, in another state it may be 20%, overall in some states it may be 90%. But in states like Rajasthan it may be only 5% also. So it varies from every state to state basing on its geographical extent, basing on the climatic condition, basing on the monsoon seasons, everything will be the reasons behind that. So in Punjab and Haryana, we have nearly 80% of the state land used for agriculture, very fertile lands. Some of the fertile lands went off to Pakistan when India and Pakistan partition was going on. In some of the lands where in Pakistan you get very, very fertile lands. The borders you get for India, you get the yellowish grass, which is a dry grass. There you get green grass, means it's a fertile land. Even grass also will be very fertile there. What are grass fertile? What are? Means on the fertile land, if grass is grown, that will be in green in color. But in Indian land, where in the desert lands, where in the Rajasthan border, when you see, you find dry grass. That is another significant point which we need to remember when we talk about these points. And as I told you, in Punjab and in Haryana, we have 80% of the state land completely used for agriculture. Only 10% of the state land is used here for agriculture in Arunachal Pradesh. Why? Forests. Nobody can go inside. Tigers, lions, snakes, insects, all will be there. Second, mountains. Heavy mountain lands. Irrelevant areas to stay. Difficult to live there. Regular floods. Improper conditions. These all may be the reasons. And then moving on to understand how are the forests in India. I told no sir, forests dangerous animals. That also we are not living in India. That is a specialty in India. We are, according to the National Forest Policy of India, the forest should be nearly 33% of the entire land. For example, out of 3.28 million square kilometers, we should have at least some 1 million square kilometers of forest land should be there. Do we have that much land? India has around some 65,000 to 67,000 of square kilometers of land only under covered by forest, which is falling short than the natural requirement. Why do we require a forest also this much? For us only place is not there to live. According to the national scientists who studied on the climatic conditions, and they told that in a land when 33% of the bit is covered with forest lands, that will make the entire land to have good climatic condition, proper time of the seasonals occurring, monsoons coming in time, resulting in a good crop growth, resulting in the regular chain to flow in a regular systematic way, which does not affect the climate at all, wherein the temperatures on the land would not increase as they were increasing now, which results in the reduction of the temperature, normal climatic conditions, where it would not be affecting the ozone layer, where it would not be having a cause for the global warming. This much logic is there behind this forest. We ate of forests also. The forests are coming down, they are now nearly 19 to 20% only forests. So according to the National Forest Policy in 1952, 33% of the land should be maintained under the forest. Then only the ecological balance can be maintained in the country. That also not there. Wait, moving on here. What happened for the forests then? The forests are being converted into wastelands. What are wastelands? Forests, regularly animals are taken for making them to graze there. Regularly the people, those who stay nearby the forest, enter into the forest, cut small trees. Everybody will think, I am only cutting the tree. Nobody else is cutting. This much large forest is there, nobody is seeing, so I can cut. Daily one tree he is cutting. He will live for 10 years. 3650 trees he will cut. Daily cutting. Like this, some 10 families are there. Every day cutting, bringing, using, burning, cutting, bringing, burning, cutting, bringing, burning, cutting, bringing, burning. Rest, grazing, grazing, grazing. So that land gets on slowly getting cleared. They will enter into the forest. Slowly, 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 they will go off into deep into the forest. Cutting, eating, burning. Like this, forest land has come down. Now this land will be declared as waste land, not useful, because no river will be flowing nearby to forest there that side, and nobody will be ready to come and settle there, because it was once upon a time a forest nearby to forest. They will declare as a wasteland or a dry land. Nobody will do cultivation there. Slowly it will turn into a place where we can do the places like where we can get the settlements. And we also declare some other category of lands also like this, like rocky lands where huge rocks are present, arid, semi-dry conditions where rains will not come, hot climatic conditions, and desert lands. These are also considered as wastelands. Forest clearing, this, both regular activities in India, these all are done. Then settlements, people started to build their houses in these regions where it is very less in cost. Then roads they will lay on this kind of wastelands only. Railways they will build on this kind of wastelands only. Industries they will build. Then these all will result in land degradation. How land will get degraded, sir, if we are using this one positively? You build an industry, you build a factory. In the factory you use machines. In the machines you use oil, paints and some chemicals, something to clean every item of in the factories. Once you use that one and chemicals are used to wash something, and once it is done, where do you keep the waste? When you are burning something, smoke will come. Where will the smoke go? Smoke will go into the atmosphere, wastewater will come into the land. That wastewater will go into the land, into the internal layers of the land, resulting in land degradation. That's how land gets degraded here. Underground layers of the water will get absorbing this one, contaminated, spoiled, entire land spoiled. That's how you are degrading the entire land, by establishing a factory. Next, other methods of land degradation. Most of us know that if we have food, shelter and clothing, 95% of the needs are fulfilled. This is an old saying, sir. Modern day means you should have one house. We told shelter, that's it. Food, daily tasty foods, now changed, menu changed. Clothing, brands, different brands. Sir, now vehicles also we need, sir, traveling, transport. Maybe we can add, maybe in the next textbook they will add. CBSE people also will add transport facilities. But moving on to understand this one, the entire land, 130 million land has got already degraded. 130 million square kilometers of land has already got degraded. The rest, 28% forest. In that land degraded, we have 28% of forest. And in that also we have other categorization. 56% is water eroded. How can water spoil the land? I told you just now one example. Chemicals can bring. When you go to any beach, you observe the water flow will be coming on towards us. When the water flow is coming on towards us, you find some bubbles like things, and when water is leaving us, you find some black particles settling down on the seashore. What are those? Iron content, calcium contents, all the different minerals which got mixed, salt content, everything will be in the sea. We don't know what are added into the sea in the ships. That also we don't know. What is carried in the ships, what is being poured down into the sea. Who will see? Nobody will see. These all will get mixed inside and come for us on the seashore. We go there, jumping, dancing, playing, regular activity for us. With all these chemicals, we don't know what happened actually in the ship and what did it throw there. So all these things will be there. So in that, salt and alkaline natures are affecting the land. Other than that, human beings, as human beings, we did not do anything, sir. Yeah, we did many things. What are those human beings' activities? First, taking buffaloes, cows, overgrazing. I told no, forest, eating, overgrazing, mining than the required limit, completely mining till the depth where you can mine, do the mining. Then what happens? The land will get the scratches there. So it becomes into dry land. Already dry land only, no? Full dry land. Underground layers also will become completely dry. Next, in the states like Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Orissa and Chhattisgarh, mining activity has completely degraded the environment, land in particular. Then, afterwards, overgrazing daily, over irrigation, completely drilling of the entire inner layers of the water outside and doing over agriculture. The factories like cement, calcite, soapstone and ceramic, all chemicals getting into the land after they are purified and everything, contaminating the land, underground water layers. So how to save our land degradation, or how to stop land degradation? Land degradation can be stopped by simple methods. We call them simple methods, but practically it's very impossible for us because we don't like good things. Now let us see here. Afforestation. Deforestation, we generally what we do? We cut down the forest. Afforestation is to grow the forest. We have to grow the forest. That is the best method to get land pure control. Land degradation will not be there. Management grazing. What is management grazing? We have to do MBA in grazing. What sir is talking? Management grazing means daily plan properly, take the cattle, give them a limited place for grazing, take them in a systematic way. Like 1 month you take here, leave this land for 1 month, go for the other place, do grazing there. After 1 month you return here, their grass will grow. In the meanwhile, here grass, whatever is grown in 1 month, you can graze it. Daily going and grazing, how it will grow? We should give sufficient amount of time for that to grow. So proper management of grazing also is important. Next, planting of trees. Wherever you find that there is a possibility of landslides to be happening, there you need to have a planting the shrubs, plants, and to stop the land degradation happening, to having the landslides happening, so that the plants can stop the soil erosion also. Then moving on to control mining. As I told you before, in the mining, when they are going into the extreme depth and bringing scars for that, instead of that, up to a certain level, government has put a restriction. So go along with that. Follow the restrictions. Follow the instructions carefully. Carefully you need to manage all these things. Then only you get proper some methods of controlling land degradation. Until and unless human beings do not take the thing seriously, because of some people's activities, the entire world have to pay the compensation for that. Everybody in the world will get the adverse effects because of few people's greedy nature. We need to remember this point and we need to follow some precautions from everybody's point of view, considering as a soil as a resource. We have seen land as a resource. We have discussed the different patterns, how is the land been categorized, and later we also analyzed how to stop the land degradation, why it is getting degraded, and what are the methods to stop land degradation. Now moving on to understand soil as a resource, let us see here. Soil has been playing a very, very vital role in the modern days or in the ancient days, because soil has been the only medium through which a plant can grow on the earth. Sir, without soil, plants cannot grow? Yes. Do you find any trees growing on a hill or a mountain? You don't find. On rocks, on stones, you don't find anything. It is only because of the soil you get the trees being growing. It is only because of, in literal words, mud, where plants will grow. We need to know that soil is very, very important for us. That is the meaning. medium of growth of the plant. It takes millions of years to develop the soil for a centimeter on the earth. For us, it takes less than a second to remove the entire soil from there with a crane. You take the entire edge and throw it somewhere. But it takes nearly millions of years to grow the soil pattern to a centimeter above than that. It is really very, very tough. And when we talk about the way the people are reacting, it's really very hard. There are various forces in the nature which help to shape the formation of the soils. The various forces are temperature, actions of running water. When the water is running, it takes the soil along with that away and it throws it somewhere else. Then wind, when heavy winds come, they make the soil to also fly along with that. We have the glaciers. Glaciers, when they fall down and take the entire mud. Chemical organic compounds, chemicals also take. Inorganic compounds also take the soil. Everybody will take the soil along with them. So there are different forces in the nature itself which make the tendency of the soil to move from one place to another place. And moving on to color. Basing on the color, thickness, texture, then age of the soil, chemical and the physical properties. So how do we categorize the soil? What are the criteria to categorize the soil? The criteria to categorize the soil is, how does the soil look? How does the soil look? Soil looks very beautiful. Soil looking means looking at the color of the soil here. Everything is mud only. Black soil, red soil, what soil? Thickness. Soil will be this much thick, then it is stone, no? How you call that thickness? The thickness of the soil. Texture, how is it? Is it soft? Is it crispy? What is the nature of that? Age, how long has it been there? How long? Millions of years. Then chemicals, what are the chemicals that are present in the soil? Then moving on to physical properties, what does it exhibit? Is it very hard? When water is poured, how does it become? Is it very soft, very sticky, very hard? How does it react? So basing on the color of the soil, the thickness of the soil, the texture of the soil, the age, the chemicals, the properties, we have categorized the soils into 4 major categories. Actually into 5 major categories. We shall discuss the 5th category later. But before that, the 4 major categories are alluvial soil, black soil, red and yellow soil, laterite soil. The 5th one is arid soil. As I told you, we have 5 major categories of soils. I have taken all the 5 major categories. Let us see here. Alluvial soil, black soil, red and yellow soil, laterite soil, and the arid soil or the desert soil. Let us go on one by one. Starting from the left, let us see here. The arid soil. The arid soil is a soil which the color of the soil, as I told you before, color, nature, texture, physical, chemical composition, these all are the basis to divide a soil. So basing on the color, the arid soil or the desert soil has red to brown shade. It is not a completely red, it is not completely brown. It is a mixture of red to brown shade. Then we have the nature of the soil is sandy. It's very, very sandy. And it has more saline content. How water will get saline content? When the water mixed with the other salts, water is getting evaporated. Salts are remaining in the land only. Then that nature will come. That results in the high common salt in this particular desert lands. In deserts generally you find high common salt affected places. Then it lacks the basic humus because bacteria cannot survive in these high temperature regions. Then it also lacks moisture. That's why we can't do cultivation in the desert lands. Very difficult. Then because of the calcium content more in the soil, conquer, it results in the problematic situations. But with proper irrigation treatment, if we can provide proper irrigation methods, how they are doing in Rajasthan, especially in the western part of Rajasthan, where we have desert, small desert, Thar desert, in 2 lakh square kilometers. That desert land can be very well utilized, not completely the desert. The areas around that are called as arid lands. The desert inside land will not be called as an arid land. Don't get confused here. The lands which are very adjacent to the desert lands are called arid lands or semi-arid lands. These lands can be brought into cultivatable lands by providing proper irrigational methods to that one, giving a proper treatment to the soil by adding certain chemicals which are reactive to the existing chemicals there, and turning them by regular supply of water. You can bring that one into regular cultivatable land. That are the features of arid soils. Moving on to alluvial soils. Alluvial soils are very widely spread where? North India. In the northern plain, in the entire northern plain, Indian northern plain, and the Himalayan rivers. The Himalayan rivers are Ganga, Indus and Brahmaputra, where they have brought the entire deposits and made this place very, very fertile place. The soils what we got from there. And also the eastern coastal plains, Mahanandi and Kaveri also contributed there. That's how some part of the alluvial soil is also found in the eastern corner or eastern coastal plain of India. Then what is the nature of the soil? It is sandy, silt and clay. It is a combination of sandy nature, silt nature and clay nature, combination nature. Then we also find that from the top of the hill mountains, when any water flow is happening, in the middle you have a breaks. In these break regions known as pediment soils or pediment rocks, where in the middle of that you find the soil or the mud known as dewars, coarse or terrai, the middle regions. And it is also known as, in the alluvial we have again different categorization. Older alluvial, new alluvial. Older alluvial is known as Bangar, new alluvial is known as Khadar. In the older alluvial, you have more content of Kankar, which is not good when it comes to Khadar. Khadar is more fertile than Bangar. It gives more production output, and also it has the chemicals like potassium, phosphoric, dry alcohol products, and these are more useful for production, for agriculture. Alluvial soils are the best soils for doing agriculture if we can do properly. Let us go a quick recap here. Arid soils are red to brown. Alluvial soils are bit not completely red, not completely brown, in the middle texture. Sandy and saline, they are extended in the entire northern plain. High common salts, no common salts. They are not brought by any rivers, they are brought by Himalayan rivers. They lack humus and moisture. They do not lack the humus and moisture. They have high content of canker. They also have the canker. It can be used for irrigation with careful proper methods. It can be used because they naturally have all the important chemicals which are used for agriculture and cultivation. Now moving on to the other category of soil, black soil. Black soil is also known as rigor soil, and the soil color, I think by the name itself you can understand it is a black soil. It is a black rigor soil. It is used more for cultivation of the cotton. Cotton soil also is famous, that is nothing but black soil. You get a general blank asking in the examination saying that which soil is good for cotton? Black. Rigor soils are also good for dash? Cotton. Rigor soils are also known as dash? Cotton, or cotton soil or red soil, black soil. Then this is found in the northwestern part of Deccan, covering the states like Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Maharashtra and Chhattisgarh, where the rivers have contributed for this one are Krishna, Godavari valley regions. In these regions you find it more. It holds more amount of moisture, and it also contains the chemicals like calcium carbonate, magnesium, potassium and lime, where it is very sticky in nature. Once it gets wet, immediately you need to start to do the cultivation and process and everything. Once it gets wet, it becomes very, very sticky, where it is not easy for you to do cultivation. That is a special feature of black soils. It's a very, very fertile soil actually. It is also known as rigor cotton soil. Moving on to the red and yellow soil. Red soil or yellow soil. What is this red and yellow soil? We will understand that one. It is found mostly filled with the crystalline igneous things or the rocks. It is found in the region of southern part of Deccan in the states like Orissa, Chhattisgarh, then southern parts of the Ganga plain. It is reddish when it is in its nature. When it is being hydrated, when hydrogen gets added, when water gets added for this one, it turns into yellowish nature. That is the reason why it is called as red yellow soil. It is also very useful for agriculture. It is found in more parts of central and southern parts of India. Central part mainly we find this kind of soil. Moving on to the laterite soil. Laterite soil is occurred from the Greek word called later meaning brick. It is derived from the Greek word called later meaning brick. It is having very high temperatures and heavy rains. Because of high temperatures, the humus bacteria cannot survive here. It is being died. The humus content is very low. Because of this high temperatures, bacteria cannot survive here. And the country or the states where we found this kind of soil is in Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh and Assam regions. But through using proper soil conservation methods, we can use this soil for cultivation of tea and cultivation of cashew nuts. So the states which are following the proper soil conservation methods and utilizing the land for this tea and cashew nuts are Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu and even Andhra Pradesh. So that we have the different categories of soils. The 5 major categories of soils are arid, alluvial, black, red and yellow, laterite. They all have different colors, different textures, different chemicals available, and they are found in different parts of the country. But altogether, these all come under the category of soil as a resource. Now, we shall further discuss about what is soil exposure or erosion and soil conservation methods. Now, moving on to understand here, how is the soil erosion happening and what are the methods that we need to follow to have soil conservation. First, let us try to understand what is soil erosion. The topmost layer of the soil getting washed away by water, by wind or by any natural calamity or disaster leads to soil erosion. The topmost layer of the soil, meaning here the entire soil which is present will get flowing away with the water or will be raised away by the wind, which results in soil erosion, where the soil content will become very less there. That is called soil erosion. Soil formation we discussed earlier. It takes millions of years to form 1 centimeter of soil on the land. So, soil formation and soil erosion go hand in hand. Soil formation and soil erosion must be together, otherwise it results very dangerous. And now, what are some of the factors that are making the soil to be forming into eroded state? 1. Overgrazing. Over-eating up of the land of the grass actually on the land. How can overgrazing result in soil erosion? We all know that on land you have grass growing. Daily you are eating the grass, which makes the land to get dry there and gets daily getting sun rays directly and getting dry here. Once it gets very dry, when it gets connected with the rainwater or the wind flow, the topmost layer will go up. That's why overgrazing results in soil erosion. Then moving on to the winds, glaciers. These winds and glaciers make deep gullies, make a big holes and take away the entire winds, the entire soil, resulting into gullies. Then when the soil, topmost fertile soil moves away, that very good agricultural land turns into a very bad land, that resulting in failure of agriculture in that particular field or particular land. So one example what we have is Chambal in the Rajasthan state, where it is also known as ravines. Ravines means the place where the entire soil erosion has happened. It's called ravines. So what are the different categories of soil erosions? If the topmost soil sheet, entire sheet of the soil gets eroded, that is called sheet erosion. If the entire topmost soil layer, the entire layer gets eroded, that is called soil erosion. In that category we have sheet erosion. If it is happening in the form of like fingernails, some places, small parts, it is getting over. Like how do we get fingerprint on a mud? Then in that particular place only you get the soil erosion. Means not the entire complete sheet, small parts if it takes away and goes, that is called rill erosion. Entire sheet will go away. Like fingers, small parts will be flying, rill. When it makes holes or like big places of empty, this land getting turned, entire land, then again the entire soil, then again up, then again down, that results in gully erosion. So we have three major categories of erosions also: sheet erosion, rill erosion, gully erosion. And moving on to the what are the best methods to have soil conservation, how to save our soil from getting eroded. First one, terrace cultivation. When you are having the terrace lands from where the water will flow and make the entire soil to go away, there you take the terrace cultivation. When the cultivation is developed, the force of the water will be restricted. Mud will be held by the plants, by the roots of the plants. How mud will catch, plant will catch the mud, you will get general physical doubts, no? So mud will be held by the roots of the plants, which will make the soil to remain there. The roots will act as the connectors between the mud and the down layers of the soil, which makes the soil to hold very strongly there. So the mud will not get evaporated there. Doesn't get flow away from there. This is very good in the soil regions or Himalayan belt, where in the western and the central Himalayan region, we have very good improvement of terrace cultivation, which resulted in very positive sign. Then we need to have strip cropping. What is this strip cropping? Strip cropping is a cropping. You take a large piece of land where you have entire farm. The entire farm has been divided into small strips, and where you need to plant in these small strips a line of grass. A line of grass giving an interval times of gaps, a line of grass. When the line of grass has been laid, when generally wind comes, the plants will automatically get tendency to bend towards this side or that side. Grass doesn't bend, it gets standard like that. Grass doesn't have any stem, no, it stands like that only. So that grass will get that one holded. So it can preserve the soil erosion, it can stop the soil erosion. These strips where you've kept the grass is known as shelter belts. They are actually providing shelter for the crop or the soil not to move away from there. And also it is resulting in, it has been proved very successful in Western India, that is the stabilization of the sand dunes. So it has been very fantastically proved. So we all can believe in that and we all can follow this one. These are some of the methods which can be followed to stop the soil erosion, which results in soil conservation. So in this lesson, we have discussed what are the different categories of resources, what is a resource, how can we explore the resource positively. As Gandhiji told, there is enough for everybody, but there is no end for greed. So it's for few people greed, it is at the cost of all the others' interest. That should not be there. Simple is better, small is beautiful. All these quotations always remains in our mind that we need to go according to our requirement, not according to the entire nation's eating away in one person's hold. That doesn't lead to good results. Then we have seen the different categories of land utilizations. India specifically we have discussed how the land pattern is used in India. Then we saw the different kinds of soils. What is soil erosion? What is soil conservation? I hope you all understood this one. The key questions from this you will get: division of the resources. You need to draw the diagram. What are the different resources that are found here? Then you need to understand what are the best ways of using land, and then how to stop soil erosion. Different categories of soil erosions are the key questions which will be asked in the examination. So you need to focus in these areas for this unit.